Thank you everyone for showing up. It's so lovely to see you all. I'm happy that we can talk about this topic. I'll just share my presentation so we can all focus on one thing. Can you see the presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
It's coming. It's coming.
Yes. Can you see me on the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for confirming. Okay, so my name is Anya. I'll start with a short introduction so you know who you're talking to or who you're listening to. There's a lot of us, so I'll always try to keep it interactive on the chat during the workshops that I have. If I can't see something on the chat immediately, I'll try to answer it later, of course, because this is for you to get the most out of this hour. And so we can learn from one another. I'm a psychologist. I've been doing aggression replacement training, which is a cognitive behavioral training for 4 or 5 years now. Sorry, 2021. It's so 4 or 5 years I've been doing aggression replacement training. It is a method of looking at anger and looking at aggression in, let's say, a way that we experience the emotion. The emotion is true, the emotion is real of anger, but we look at aggression as a behavior that, first of all, we can train, but first we need to become aware of it, know what it is, and figure out not only how to change a behavior, but also how to work on certain thought patterns, because at the end of the day, we are experiencing multiple things at a time when we think about anger and aggression. Of course, please be mindful of the fact that what we're going to talk about today, mistakes in thinking, like many things in anger management, sure, they're easy when it comes to theory, but we all know when we're in the moment, when we are livid and all the lid is flipped, everything's going out. Of course, that intense emotion is there and the reaction is there. So please be mindful that everything that we talk about today, and if you are working on your aggression and on your aggressive reactions, please think about it with kindness, with the things don't change from day to day. It's a journey of exploration. It's a journey of learning and figuring out what's the best rhythm for me. Because at the end of the day, why do we work with aggression? Because it's hurtful to us and to others. And science shows us that aggressive reactions have, as does stress, long-term effects on our body and our mind. So let's get down to details. So I said a little bit about that. What happens in aggression replacement training is talking about, and I'm talking about this first because mistakes in thinking are part of this method. Okay, so I'm giving a general introduction to then go down to the mistakes in thinking. So, you know, we talk about controlling anger and aggression, but it's also for us to deal with other people, because it's not only us in an interaction, but there's usually an other side that's either actively aggressive or passively, or is ignoring us, or is a person that is a victim of our aggression, right? And we also have to deal with that and learn how to be safe and to the best of our abilities, not hurt other people and not hurt ourselves. So what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to define mistakes in thinking, and I'm going to show you, to the best of my abilities, the examples and explain those different mistakes in thinkings. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about different examples because there's quite a lot. And that will be also a time for reflection, for thinking, are any of these mistakes in thinking prevalent to my way of thinking and my world? And then we'll talk about some preventative strategies. Of course, like I mentioned before, this is more informative, a little bit interactive. So take what you can with the safety that you need, because these are, of course, topics that are emotional, and you know, we're all meant to be safe and actually help ourselves and not be detrimental to our functioning. So with that in mind, let's talk about mistakes in thinking. What is a mistake in thinking? It's called a cognitive distortion. Why? Because it's the way of thinking, it's how we think that's somehow impeded, that it's somehow flawed. Why is it flawed? We are not perfect logical computers. We would love to be, but we're not. And we intake all this data, all this information. We have a whole lifetime of training from observing our parents and our caregivers and the environment around us and all the information that we have in front of us. And all of that goes into how we process certain thoughts, right? And sadly, our brain, pulls a number on us and is not always great in that and is not always perfect in that. And that's why I call it a mistake in thinking, because it's some kind of a logical mistake, right? All of us have it. There's no human being on this planet that I am aware of, at least, that doesn't employ one or many of these strategies, of these thinking patterns. So that's the first thing that's important to remember. It is normal. I believe in self-development and growth, so I believe in building awareness of these patterns and seeing how we can support changing those certain patterns. However, really, it's not something that, is out of the blue. Everything in psychology has a spectrum. So sure, someone can be on the spectrum of having these thoughts that are super obsessive. And yes, that would be then a red flag. But most of us simply have different types of cognitive distortions that we employ in different situations. Usually we can manage them to a better degree, but sometimes they create a lot of tension and conflict and result in anger and aggression, right? In the specifics, let's say, route that we're talking about here today. So let's go specifically into examples. And here, when we're talking about these examples, it would be great for you guys to kind of reflect upon yourself, write down the ones that you find are closest to your heart, yeah, and that touch you the most. At this point, do you have any questions? Because I flooded through quite quickly through the introduction, and maybe you have any questions about these cognitive distortions or aggression replacement training.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Okay. If anything, please shoot on the chat. And I'll get started. Okay, so let's start with the first one. All or nothing thinking, polarized thinking. It's basically the mistake in thinking that there's a 0-1 situation, right? And the social functioning and communication is not 0-1. It's not this polar or this polar. A good example would be if we think about politics, right? Of course, a sensitive topic, but if you communicate with someone, you can see if someone is on this extreme. It's either only this or only this side. Most people actually, when you talk to them, will be comfortably somewhere in the middle. Sure, they can hear about one side, but also they see some value in the other side, right? And they will have a mix and match. So if someone employs the mistake or all of nothing thinking, you can really see those extremes. Overgeneralization. Overgeneralization is also quite, it's evident from the word in itself. It's that this one little situation is for sure true to all the situations, right? So if, I don't know, my niece does this one little small thing, I am sure she was out to get me all the time, right? That would be overgeneralizing. Disqualifying the positive. Disqualifying the positive is one of the things that we observe. It's funnily enough, it's quite, a lot of people employ this, disqualifying the positive. It's when you literally see evidence of something positive happening. For example, at work, I get an email giving me great feedback. And I'm looking at the email that is proof of something positive happening. And I'm saying to myself, no. I did horribly actually on this project, right? Even though I have literal proof in front of me. That would be disqualifying the positive. And the next ones, also very fun ones. Generally, I love these mistakes in thinking because always when I talk about them, you start seeing, oh, wait, I have sometimes employed a couple or many of them. Jumping to conclusions. So there are two options for jumping to conclusions. One being mind reading. So you're standing in front of someone and you're like, I know they're judging me. I know what that person is thinking. I don't know if you can recall any of your arguments and you're sitting there and you're even saying this out loud, that I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking or feeling this, right? Fortune telling, very much the same. I'm in a situation and I say, I know what's going to happen next. I'm certain about X, Y, Z that's going to happen. The next one, number 5, catastrophizing or minimizing. That is taking a situation and either blowing it into catastrophic proportions, that everything in this situation will for sure go bad, or some people employ the other side, so minimizing. It's not a problem. Everything's chill. I don't need to care about this. Irrelevant. This is irrelevant. This whole situation is irrelevant. This feeling is irrelevant. Putting it down. And the 6th one, and I'm going to do a little pause so we can have a discussion after this. 6 more will come, but first we will digest these 6. Emotional reasoning. And this is something that a lot of people employ. It's somehow a very natural, although logically we know that my emotions don't dominate a situation. So let's say I go into a situation and I say, I feel anxious about this. So something has to be wrong with the situation that I'm in. So I'm saying that my emotions, in a way, are the truth about a situation. Even though, and a lot of us can absolutely logically say that it's not logical, right? That I think, my emotions are the ultimate truth. But somehow emotionally, a lot of us do fall into that mind pattern. So if I'm thinking, this is my emotion, so yeah, for sure, this is how the whole situation is impacted by it, which is a logical fallacy, actually. I'm going to give 6 more in a second, but now I would like to stop because I know if this is for me, I've been working with this is obvious for me, but maybe you have questions, or if you're happy to share, maybe there's one out of these 6 that you really see are close to your heart. And maybe you would like to share an observation about yourself when it comes to these mistakes in thinking. Oh, yes, please. Sarah?
Yeah. Hi. Yes, thank you very much. This is very interesting already. I have a question with regards to number 6, emotional reasoning. Then how is it different from being intuitive, in the sense that when you are in a situation somehow and you feel something is wrong, then some people say it's your intuition also telling you that something just doesn't feel right. So how is this then different than emotional reasoning in this negative way?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I would approach this question from a couple of angles. First of all, we're going to talk about the prevention strategies in that. First of all, here we need to kind of assess, is this situation based on facts? Because remember, our intuition very often is triggered by signals that happen around us, right? Of course, these aren't signals that we can always name, but let's say, we're on the street and there's someone coming too close to me. That's my intuition, but simultaneously it's me correctly assessing the input of stimuli that I have around me, right? If I'm arguing with someone and someone is creating a dangerous situation for me physically or emotionally, that's also me correctly assessing the danger threat around, right? Here I would the emotional reasoning, here I would kind of go to this side where I'm no longer questioning, but I'm saying, this is my feeling, so it has to be true. right? And that fundamental belief in that that is true, and not my intuition that I would say is a bit softer. My intuition doesn't have to be called the truth. My intuition is some kind of gut emotion that's driving me, but it can be disproven. Does that make sense to you, Sarah? Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah, actually, I think I see the difference somehow. Yeah, I think with emotional reasoning, somehow you are stating that this is as like a fact. You're turning the emotion somehow into a fact. This is the fact of it because you feel this way, not based on any like logical or arguments or something like that.
correct. And and I think your question brings us already to this nuance of situations. What I said, theoretically, this is all very simple, but when we're in a situation, there's a million variables, there's a million nuances there that we have to take into consideration. And in communication, that line of fact and truth is sometimes very delicate, or of anger and aggression and appropriate reaction. It's a very delicate balance between these moments, right? And between arguing, I feel like this and this is the truth, right? And sticking to that versus saying, I'm not feeling great, like something's telling me that something's happening and I'm not feeling great. However, maybe in 30 seconds, I can question that. So these are little differences, but these are differences that count in communication.
Yeah, I see. Thanks.
Sure thing. Thank you for asking the question. Any other questions or observations?
I was trying to think, for me, if I recognize anything, but definitely like I can see sort of kind of jumping to conclusions thing, immediately kind of recognize that as oh yeah, when you're predicting or forecasting that someone's going to do something when they're not necessarily, you're already foreshadowing the conversation somehow. So yeah, that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Even if you don't want to share here in the group, I totally understand. But please, I really motivate you to kind of write down your reflections. When we write something down, we always also create the space. That's why journaling or having a diary really works for our emotional expression. Studies show that when we write these thoughts down, they really are somehow, I'm going to call it here, not fulfilled, but maybe worked through a little bit, right? So I motivate you also to jot down your feelings or the moments that maybe come up, right? Those realizations. I'm going to slowly move on, but don't worry, I'll have a slide where all of them are together. So 7, I love 7, the should statement. Depending on where you are from culturally, the should statement is very strong. So I have to, I ought to do this, I should do this. It's somehow, and like I said, sometimes it's very a cultural norm, right? That I need to adhere to these principles and to these rules. That is a fallacy. And very often when I work with clients, this is, it's kind of abstract because you're thinking, what? I have to live my life in XYZ, right? This is what keeps me intact. And that is true, of course, but simultaneously overusing a should statement is impairing for us because it creates a lot of rules that we expect ourselves to live in, right? That at the end of the day are not either, I don't want to say good, but are not necessarily adaptive to our emotional well-being. For those people who have loved the should statements, I recommend a little game, because we don't often realize how often we say, I should do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. Try to tally it. It's not meant to be a stress-inducing game. So if this kind of builds up negative emotion in you, then put it away. None of these working on these changes, it's not meant to be a push. We're meant to look at change and embrace it with kindness and with mindfulness. for sure. But the should statement, sometimes I have this game and my client comes back and they're like, wow, I had 55 shoulds in a day. And you think that's impossible? No, it's possible. So if you kind of feel emotionally in the space to start tallying up your shoulds during the day, go for it. Labeling, I'm going to the next one now. Labeling and mislabeling. So like I wrote here, it's an extreme overgeneralization. It's the moment where I have to put a little label on myself for doing something. I don't know. I'm in the shop and I'm kind of, let's say I react in a nasty way to the shop attendant and I'm thinking, oh, I'm such a horrible person. Horrible person is a label, right? On mislabeling, of course, the same. However, it's inappropriately labeled to the situation, right? Labels, as we know, I always like to present something on both sides. Labels can be helpful because sometimes naming what I'm doing can be helpful to me changing that behavior. However, at the same time, it can be detrimental because the other side of it is I can be hurtful to myself. I can say bad things to myself. And in a long-term process, that, of course, makes a little wound and a little scratch that becomes deeper and deeper. Sorry, I've been in sessions all day and I need a drink from time to time. Excuse me. So the next one, personalization. It's the mistaken thinking that me in the situation is causing the situation. So everyone had a bad time because of me. This whole situation went crap because of me. So why is that a fallacy? It's not a fallacy to think that sometimes we can behave inappropriately. Yeah, and someone can react and not have a great time. Sure, that's true. However, we need to give a freedom to other people that are around us, that they have their own power of emotionally reacting to us. We do not have the we do not have the tools to overpower someone to that extent, or a whole group or a whole situation. Sure, sometimes, and especially in anger and aggression, we can dominate because aggression is powerful, right? Anger is powerful. And of course, if I run around and I shout in rage and I create a situation where my whole family is really suffering and hurting, sure, I can say, I have hurt my family, right? That's a fact. However, going to an emotional space where I say everyone is miserable and their life is miserable because of me, then that's already a fallacy of thinking. Again, I'm giving these different abstract examples because the line is so close sometimes of thinking like this and of thinking like this. Where's the fallacy? Where's the fact, right? Next one, number 10, change fallacy. Change fallacy, the easiest example I'll give you is in a relationship. I think to myself, if this other person would just not be angry, our whole relationship would be glorious. So if this other person changes, or this one aspect changes, everything else will fall into place, right? You know, we love to dream and I implore you to dream, but realistically, that's not how life and relationships work, that one thing changes and everything else falls into place. Usually, if there's some kind of hurt or complex situation in a relationship and it's not working for a prolonged period of time, that's usually not one factor that can be magically changed. Because like I mentioned in psychology, there's no magic pill or there's no magic switch to change a whole amount, hundreds of variables that are included in communication and in relationships. Moving on to the next one, fallacy of fairness. So this is for people who live their life with the code of this is fair and this is unfair. I do this because this is fair. I do this because this is right, right? And sure, that's a moral code and there's nothing wrong with that moral code. But where it becomes a fallacy, it becomes a fallacy because if something suddenly trumps that way of thinking, so if suddenly there's a situation that interferes with that logic, right, then that creates tension. that creates friction, and that creates, of course, very often the aggressive and angry reactions, right? Fairness in itself is a morally difficult concept to think about because it's individual, right? In a moral standpoint, my fairness is not your fairness, right? And I'm not even talking about legal stuff, because legality is something completely different than my moral reasoning of what's fair and unfair, right? And what's right and wrong in my moral standpoint. So this is a really individual one, right? Because it's where's my compass leading me? And number 12, oh wait, I see a question. Of fairness, let me think of the question is, could I give an example of the fallacy of fairness? For example, this is difficult, and no dissing to any mother here, because I'm giving an example that's oversimplified. Please remember this, right? And this is in no way a criticism, but a mom that, a child that says, oh, I don't want to do this and this that way, right? And you're in your conduct saying, no, this is how the world works. You have to do this because this is how fair, like how right is, right? So for example, I'm trying to think of a simpler example. If anyone could come up with one at this point, because I'm drawing a blank, if anyone has an example or has done this fallacy of fairness and can bring up an example, that would be very helpful, because I can't think of one that's kind of simple and direct.
I might have one for you, which is possibly a little bit stupid, but hopefully it will give the picture that you want to create here.
Go for it.
Stay with the mother, and it has two children, right? So let's say one has an allergy against, let's say, orange juice, and the other one hasn't. Okay. So the one child that wants to have orange juice gets the orange juice, but the other child that wants to have the orange juice as well, which has the allergy, doesn't get the orange juice. Of course, it will immediately step into this feeling of this is unfair.
Yeah.
Why is the other person, so the sibling, why is it getting it? Why can't I get it? Not understanding at the very moment because of the allergy, right? So the fairness compass is exactly triggering already.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much. And then what would that child experience? That child will, that's what I couldn't shift in my brain, because the kid is the example, right? And the kid is going in that fallacy, and a lot of kids do that. This isn't fair. The world isn't fair. And think of how do they react then? They react with anger, with hopelessness. They don't understand why the world is hurting them, basically. Right? And that's that fallacy. And kids don't understand that. But as adults, we also go through the world of thinking, I don't know, I got a paper from an administration, right? That sucks. And I don't know, from the tax office, that is horrible. And I say, why, world? Why? This isn't fair to me, right? And that's my fallacy, because I think that the world should be fair to me, right? And that is logically not true. Sadly, I still hope somewhere inside, we'll find a fair and just world. But that's just my optimism. David, would you let me know if in the chat if that was a good enough explanation for you, if you got it? And I'll move on in the meantime. And then the last one that we're going to have here is always being right. And that, I think, is self-explanatory. It's our need to be right. It's if two people are debating and you see that someone's saying agree to disagree, that's the moment they're engaging in this mistaken thinking, because they're saying we're agreeing to disagree, but basically what they're saying, I'm right, and I'm going to finish this discussion with being right, right? So maybe when I'm going to change the slide to where we can see all of them. But maybe now again, I would encourage, or a time of reflection, right? Is there any of these mistakes in thinking that you hold dear to your functioning and to your heart?
Well, you mentioned a lot of, well, nice examples, and I can relate at least to half of it, to be honest. Well, change fallacy is not so much my problem, but the fallacy of fairness is exactly one of the topics which is triggering me a lot. Unfortunately, as well, the always being right. This is indeed something that is very regularly showing up in my life. Well, disqualifying the positive as well, unfortunately, as well, something which is, see, if you're in an argument with someone and you still feel like, okay, it is not yet lost, the whole discussion, but you are like in a fighting mode or something, and someone brings something positive from the other side to harmonize a little bit more, you are no longer able to take it. You are disqualifying it immediately, thinking like, well, this is a manipulation now. This person just wants to bring me into some other direction. Well, this is happening as well, yeah. And of course, number 4 is the, I don't know, this is the bestseller, I would say. This is the jumping to conclusions and the mind reading and stuff. Yeah, this is unfortunate, yeah. But you placed them very nicely, and I think you made it very clear why things are going into the wrong way, yeah, and why we feel bad in the end with ourselves. Yes.
Yeah. Sweet, thanks for that. Would anyone else like to share?
Yeah, just a question. I'm wondering, is fallacy of fairness also this thing when you end up like tallying up the things that you've done with each, but when you're trying to listen, and then but you're like, but you did this, and it's like you're trying to take responsibility, but at the same time you're like, but you did this. There's a slight you made against me, or I totally recognize this. Said in disagreements, that not being able to just sort of like accept responsibility and constantly sort of tallying up like the points, feeling seen there,
where the world was unfair to you, right, in comparison to what you're doing to give into the fairness, for sure.
And I think they relate somehow to 4 as well, when you're kind of holding on to things, you're not actually I guess also that relates to being to 12 too, like you're waiting to be right,
And thanks for actually mentioning that, because what you mentioned, Ben, and thank you so much for that, they do merge, right? Because there's no clear cut. We'll talk about the prevention strategies in a second, but figuring them out is also so much training your awareness, because it's so tough, like I said at the beginning, when things are going, when the engine is on 6th gear and you're fully in the race of anger and reacting, then obviously that's the difficult moment to realize, maybe my chain of thought is not in perfection here, right? Anyone else would like to share their observations or their thoughts about it?
Yeah, I was very interested to hear this example. Agree to disagree is something that I think a lot when I'm having disagreements with people, and then it's like, oh, well, it's okay, we can agree to disagree. And like, I always thought of that as like, I don't know, maybe like a high road, or like a good way to hold space for people who can't seem to, find a middle ground. But it's interesting that you include it here as like a kind of a negative point. So I'm interested to hear more about this.
Thanks for bringing that up. And, I think that's the truth of many of these fallacies. That we all employ them. Would I say that they're bad? Questionable. Because like I said with the should statement is a cultural norm for many people. It holds us in a life that we're happy with, that we feel content with, right? Is that bad? No, not necessarily. At the same time, is it a mistake? Like, is it a cognitive distortion? Is it a fallacy? Sure, it is. And I think the always being right is also, we're talking about some kind of balance of communication. If I'm roaring at someone with anger and I say, as kind of an opt-out, let's agree to disagree, right? So I am still holding my ground here and we are not getting to any resolution. Then is that the most, adaptive form of finishing an argument? However, if we're talking about I don't know, even a scientific debate where there are two valid sides full of arguments, right? And none of the sides want to step back, then what's fundamentally wrong in that? Like, I don't see anything fundamentally wrong in that. And I think in many of these examples, you can find moments where even one like the emotional reasoning, it can be a moment of reflection. I can have a fallacy in my brain, and that can be a moment of mindful reflection for me. But it can also be a moment where I wind myself up in anxiety about this thought, and it creates a detrimental interaction with me. So the beauty, the double-edged sword of communication being really rich in both sides. I don't know what you think about that that extension of what I said, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think that's like spot on. It really makes a lot of sense. Yeah, really thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe it's I'm out. Okay. I'm somewhere in between fallacy of fairness and always being right. Actually, it like I many times experience, like, I think some things are to be done in a certain way, and I think they are the way they should be done. And when I like make a suggestion to anybody else that they should be done like this, or this is the right way to do, that's when the friction or maybe anger happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you deal with that kind of? Have you found any solution to these fallacies, or to how you communicate?
I well, not really. I'm still trying. Yeah, but just trying to explain it patiently. However, like, why I am saying that these things should be done in a particular way.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Sami, raise your hand.
Hey, Anya. Thanks for, first of all, yeah, thank you for doing this. Quite interesting. I have a question. I think from 1 to 12, without the 6, it depends really on the person.
Yeah.
But I find number 6 is probably the most common pattern that we all face. And that brings me to, since I know that the emotions are a reaction of what we are thinking, of what we are experiencing at that moment, what we are thinking, and of course, emotions are connected to our unconscious brain.
Mm-hmm.
So here I would say, I have a question, which would be, can they be trusted? Because if we look back at all our probably bad decisions, the emotions were in control and not the mind.
Mm-hmm. Can our emotions be trusted, basically?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Short answer. Longer answer. I find us as human beings, and this is our evolutionarily amazing place we've gotten to when it comes to our emotional awareness. Remember that even if we make mistakes, and even if our emotions are maybe not so clear to us, and we still have a journey to go to, I kind of believe and work in this philosophy of, I'm here and right now, and I'm at the maximum of my health. And this is a bit of an interesting, and not everyone agrees with it, and that's totally fine. But if you think that if today I'm having a fever and I'm in bed with a fever and I'm feeling really bad, but actually what is that indicating to me? That my body is at its maximum health. It's doing its max that it can, right? And if I'm today standing in anger and thinking to myself, what I'm feeling real? Is what I'm feeling right? Because I'm standing here and like a crazy person shouting at my partner, for example, right? That is still me doing the best that I can in this situation. And let's be very clear, this is not an opt-out. This is not saying every reaction that I have is perfect. No, it's my history, my complexity of who I am has led me to this moment here. And this moment here, I can do the best that I can, right? And I think that's true for emotional truth also. I here can listen, and I am aware and I am present when it comes to my emotions. And sure, maybe I'm not there fully when it comes to understanding and being in tune with them, but that can change. I can train that, and I can allow myself to, to look at different possibilities. But for sure, trusting yourself, because at the end of the day, even if your emotions didn't lead you to perfect reactions before, but your emotions are also the catalyst for change. Your emotions are the catalyst for finding solutions, right? It's not a linear thing. I work in a solution-focused way, so you have the solutions in you. You have the power to train yourself. You have the power to learn new emotion regulation strategies, right? So yeah, sometimes maybe your emotions kicked you in the butt, proverbially, but also they create a lot of good and a lot of beauty and a lot of, amazing interactions. So I would for sure go to build trust in your emotions and build your emotional awareness and not discard them.
Beautiful answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that. You're welcome. I am conscious of time. So I'm going to go to the next slide, but please, if you have any other questions, just go for it, because now we're going to talk about prevention and some kind of, managing these cognitive distortions. So I'm very happy to, join in or share things that work for you, or also ask questions. So first of all, is building awareness. I laughed a little bit about the tally. How much do we do shoulds, right? Or how much do we employ other mistakes in thinking? So the cognitive distortions. But at the end of the day, we can't do anything if we're not aware of doing them, right? We can't change that pattern of thinking if I'm not aware that I'm actually employing that pattern of thinking. So first thing is, with absolute kindness to yourself, start observing yourself. It's not about straight away. In psychology, it's a whisper. Change happens slowly with whispers. It doesn't happen with force, right? If I tell you, don't think about the pink elephant, what are you going to think about? The pink elephant, right? If I tell you, don't have mistakes in thinking, of course you're going to employ and think about them, right? So kindly build awareness. Kindly, when you see, even if you're angry and you see, this is happening, that's good. Because if your mind can become aware of that, then you have the possibility and the probability that something can happen with that way of thinking, that you can stop it, that you can reroute it, that you can change it, right? So building awareness is fundamental. And I would even say, if you're new to this, if this is very new information for it, give yourself a month at least of observing yourself, of doing records. So number 2, write it down. At the end of the day, something that I very much promote is do a gratitude list. So what went well, not what went well, what I'm grateful for. So what I'm saying thank you to myself for. And yes, you can say thank you that the day is ending. Yes, you can say thank you for, it's not about being pleasant and, rainbows everywhere. It's about being true to yourself. You can say thank you that I observed that I employ, I don't know, the always right fallacy, or that I employ the should fallacy. You can reinforce your own awareness. Write it down. Today I saw that during these 3 huge arguments that I had today, I again did this and this. I again was thinking in this and this way. So write it down to start observing and learning yourself, because that's the most important. And second, and the third point that I recommend as a kind of quick thinking exercise, if you're not sure if you're going into a mistaken thinking or not, think fact or opinion. Think, am I starting to have a narration here about an opinion, or do I have facts? if you have the time, again, write it out for yourself. But sometimes that's very easy to do in an argument. You're like, oh wait, is this me going on about predicting, this is how you're going to behave and I know everything that you're going to do, right? Or is this actually factual, right? Is that person doing that? Is that person actually saying that? Because if that person isn't doing or saying that, then it's my opinion. Yes, please go for it.
But I have a question about how are we going to fight against those predictions if every time we predict something, we have a feeling and it turns out to be.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear the last word that you said.
How are we going to fight against our predictions if every time we predict something, we have a feeling and it turns out to be true?
Yeah. So 2 things. And this is a similar conversation to the intuition, right? We have to learn about ourselves. Am I implying a self-fulfilling prophecy? Which is totally true. If I have an intention and I think to myself, for example, I don't know, in a relationship, someone's cheating on me, right? Someone's cheating on me. Someone's cheating on me. I'm thinking that. There are many things that can happen there. What can also happen, and this 100%, please hear me very clearly, this is not that I am the fault of someone cheating in a relationship. Absolutely not. However, studies show that if I create an intention and if I create that prophecy, I can behave and I can create, interactions where someone goes into that prophecy, right? Of course, it's not my fault that someone decided to do it. Absolutely not. But we do have these very clear sets of intentions, right? I, for example, come back home and I think to myself, I don't know, I'm going to argue with my partner today, right? I'm sure, because he'll come back from work, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, and we're going to argue, right? Mm-hmm. But remember that from your side, you're also preparing for that. You're also in your micro movements, in the way of thinking, you're opening the door to, let's call it, that intention, that prophecy coming true. That's one option, right? That we subconsciously function towards our intention and prophecies. However, let's not forget that there are a set of facts, right? There are a set of facts that govern the world. And if I'm giving a relationship because here it's easy to somehow, these prophecies are easy to talk about when it comes to relationships, right? But of course, this can be when it comes to myself also, right? But there are a set of facts. So in a relationship, we can observe a set of facts and we have to identify that. If someone is, for example, if I'm the victim of aggression and someone comes and again attacks me, again attacks me, again attacks me, again attacks me, then it stops being me saying, oh, maybe something will happen. This is my imagination. But it's me actually saying, I need to prepare for a situation that is going to hurt me. So I need to position myself in a safe space where I'm not going to be hurt, right? And that, if I would say there's a reasonable agglomeration of facts that prove my point, it's no longer my imagination and my anxiety, it's a set of facts, right? I can absolutely conclude from what I'm saying that it's not clear, but sadly in these situations, it's never black and white, right? I don't know if that kind of hit the target for you, because I know it was quite complex and not very clear. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
You did answer my question.
Okay. Any follow-up questions? Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Any questions or maybe ideas of how to, help yourself with these mistakes in thinking?
I have a question about what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
How do you keep from gaslighting yourself when you're trying to decide if something is fact or opinion?
I have a big word here written actually, because this was in reference, I think, Alex, to what you mentioned before. Was it? I don't know, but it's trust. And trusting yourself is extremely difficult. And we need to work on it. You know, all of us have our family histories. All of us don't come from perfectly psychologically, you know, sane communication. That's life. All of us come with our baggage. And I'm going to go a bit around before I answer your question. Building trust towards yourself is key in saying, I trust that I'm seeing facts, or I trust that what I'm feeling is anxiety actually, and it's not completely true what I'm saying. But that's a journey, and that's a development that is not linear. It's not easy. It's not black and white either, right? And it fluctuates, because if I can stand at the end of the day in front of the mirror and say, thank you for, you know, I'm grateful for this and this today, and I'm grateful for observing this and this, and I know that to be true, because at the end of the day, the only moment, the only indicator is your trust. Yes, you're kind of standing in front of the mirror and saying, what I'm saying is true, and that's good enough for me. And that's a good enough compass for me. And if I don't trust myself, I locate myself with people around me. And this is where, you know, relationships come in that can help me build that trust towards myself. Or if I'm not sure, I trust them to be that valid mirror or that valid indication of where I can look for that truth. And I don't know if that's a good enough answer for you, Alex, but it's for sure something very abstract and non-tangible, right? And it's somehow, here we're talking about building a kind and mindful relationship to ourselves and to the close people that are around us, to live in truth and live in, I think, fulfillment when it comes to that, simply, that I can trust my own opinion, right? What do you think about that, Alex?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that that's like the word that you wrote down from what I mentioned before. In a good answer. I think, yeah, definitely for me, it's very hard to trust other people, and I think that also causes me to mistrust my own opinion sometime.
Yeah. I'm wishing you all the best when it comes to that, and you know, and motivating you that at the end of the day, thankfully, you know, and I think that comes for all of us, thankfully, we're trainable animals, you know, and reinforce yourself when you're doing things that you're satisfied with, do more of that. And like I said at the beginning of this meetup, it's a journey. There's with kindness and with observation, we can really, you know, individually and as a group go a far way, simply when it comes to our psycho-emotional, social emotional development. I don't know if there are any other questions.
Not a question actually, but maybe a tip that I can bring in as well for prevention. What I learned many years already ago is, for me at least, a very powerful statement, which was like, people are usually not going against someone else, but they are usually doing something for themselves. Means they have whatever need or demand in themselves, and they follow this path, which leads somehow to consequences with us, right? So sometimes we feel the consequences of different people's behavior, but when it comes to prevention in being aggressive or being angry or something, what I trained myself to do, and it was nice that you were just saying we are trainable animals, right? So it is exactly something that I learned over, unfortunately, the course of years, but it was working and it is still working. Whenever something strange is happening in front of me, which triggers me, one of my first reactions in me is, okay, what is happening possibly on the other side? Does it have to do anything with me right now? Do I need to react, sort of thing, right? So is there anything that I really need to react to? Is it something that has to do with me personally, or is it not something that the other person had just crappy day, is completely stressed, and I'm unfortunately the one who's standing in front of that person, and now I'm getting it, although I have nothing to do with this stress level, right? This helps a lot. That really helps a lot. And this is as well from a psychology area. It was a therapist who told me this, and it was really powerful. And I hope people can use this for themselves as well to stay a little bit longer in the calm phase, because it is so hard if you already reacted to calm down again, right? Every one of us probably knows this here in this room.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing. And David mentioned this is questioning personalization thoughts, isn't it? Could you elaborate on that? In what way? If you feel comfortable to just turn on your mic so we can have a little chat and discussion about that. Or write it in the chat, we'll read it in a second. And I think also what you just mentioned is, let's be very clear, every one of us finds their own solution. And that's the most powerful thing that we can find with our own work, or with, support of a psychologist, right, or other specialists. I really believe in all different kinds of specialists that can support. Finding what works for you is the key. So, coming to meetups like this, great, because I think we all need to learn, and that's what we can learn. We can learn how to name something. That's what I mentioned. Labeling can be good, right? Can be helpful. But also you're meant to look inside and find what works for you. And if not, reach out and find that support. But at the end of the day, if something works, do more of it, because that's the training that we need. And that's what's going to work. And that's what's going to give you a sense of equilibrium in life. And there's no other person but yourself that's meant to feel that equilibrium, right? I'm going to read on what the question was more about. So, assuming the reaction of the other has something to do with me is personalization, one of the fallacies in the list, if I understood correctly. So personalization, totally. But if I understood correctly what was mentioned a second ago, the question is it something about me? That's exactly the moment to question that. Because normally if the personalization would be, it's for sure about me, right? I see you nodding, so I'm going to just continue. It's for sure about me, right? But here I'm questioning, is this about me? Because someone's reacting, someone's just there on the other side, and they're having their own little world reaction, right? And I need a question, is this about me? Give me that microsecond to figure out, should I take this personally or should I not take it personally? And actually, that is the correct exercise when evaluating a fallacy. Am I employing a fallacy or am I not employing a fallacy in this moment? Right? That's that microsecond to give yourself to see, am I employing this fallacy about this is all about me, right? So personalization.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Lady gave a really good answer and really good tips, but we shouldn't take things personally. But I think sometimes when someone is yelling at us without any reason, I'm not able to think in that moment, should I take this personally? I'm just going to defend myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry. And that's the moment where the fight begins. I cannot think in that moment. When someone yells at me, I'm yelling back immediately. And that's it.
So just to clarify, personalization is the specific thinking, right? Is the specific chain of thought where I say, I am the cause, I am the reason why something is happening around me. That's the specific fallacy, right? Mm-hmm. What you're talking about here is the judgment. If someone's shouting at me, what should my reaction be? Because if you're being attacked, right, then in anger management, the suggestion is, right, I give myself the time and space, I'm not going to go into details, to decide what is the best reaction to keep me safe? And hopefully don't hurt the other person. But and that's your decision, that's to your own discretion, what that means for you at this time in your life and what will make you be safe, right? Of course, as a kind of rule of thumb and as a rule, it's the as a principle, aggression, if I'm shouting, if I'm, employing aggressive reaction, I'm hurting someone or I'm hurting myself, right? That's a fact. However, like I mentioned with all of this, that doesn't mean that you're not in situations where you don't find that appropriate. And first and foremost, you are the decision maker in your life. If you find that your reaction is what you need and what is appropriate to the situation, then that is your decision and you have the full right to make that decision. However, I think in a journey of introspection, you learn that some reactions are adaptive long-term and some reactions are detrimental long-term. And that is also your decision to see if you want to go into that analysis, because it's also okay that not everyone needs to employ that. And that's, your God-given right to decide where's that space, right? Where's that moment that I want to react? How do I defend myself? Where's the safe space for myself? That's, these are all questions that you know best how to answer at the end of the day. Any other questions or any other comments?
No, maybe just a small comment. I was just reflecting, like, what a good group this is. Like, I tried to look for something like this a few years ago, probably because my kids were driving me insane, and I needed to learn how to kind of react. But I just want to say that, like, this is just such a cool thing you're doing. So anyway, carry on. That's all I want to say.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy with the turnout. I'm a bit shocked, actually, to be honest. I put this online, right? And the last meetup we had a couple of people and it was amazing still. And but here 30 people, thank you again for coming. And, I don't have to say twice, I'm very passionate about this topic, anger and aggression. For sure. And I find it so important. And thank you so much, everyone, for sharing, because every time I have a group, but this is a principle of working with groups, the biggest power is from listening to one another and sharing. And actually, I think this we're coming to a natural end because the hour is finishing. I've commented on this 1,000 times throughout. Mindfulness and kindness. We're talking about anger and aggression. That's, intense enough. If you are trying to look at it and work with it through mindfulness and kindness, if we're trying to fight aggression with aggression, well, that equals aggression, right? Let's be clear. So kind to yourself. And like I said, here are my details. I just put them on the screen. If any of you, and this is for me the benchmark, red flags, I want to contact someone. You do have the power. Being here during this meetup, looking for resources, all of these things are you already stepping into a direction of self-exploration and self-growth, and power to you for that, and continue doing that simply, right? And that's what counts. If anyone needs and feels they need kind of specialized help, my help, or to really look into it, you're welcome to write. But really, we were talking about it today a little bit. Trust in yourself and step by step forward is what counts at the end of the day. So go step by step forward. And I think with that message, I'll leave you. Thank you again for the amazing turnout. Thank you for your participation and sharing. And I'm really grateful for this time.
Yeah, thank you, Anya.
Thank you.
Thanks as well. You did a great job with going through this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Have a great evening, everyone.
And you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.